Quite a lot happening since after June 12. Nigerians are still talking about, its democracy, which is 22 years down the line. Talking about unbroken democracy and representative democracy, these are some of the key issues being raised. And today on The Square, we'll be talking with some of those great Nigerians who've had, their fair share in lawmaking. They come across as some of the best crop of Nigerians to be having that conversation with at this point in time. Nigeria's democracy is our focus today on VSA. And Sulaiman, welcome. Nigeria has had 22 years of uninterrupted democracy with great expectations not quite being fulfilled. Arguably the most blessed black nation on earth and one of the nations with the smartest people in the world. Nigeria's progress in democracy has had its challenges. Now, the challenges of politics, elections, a constitution dubbed complex, cumbersome and lopsided, an unbalanced society, ethnocentric and tribalistic people are all scuttling the development of the country. Now, after many years of military governance, democracy finally came in 1999 amid cheers, huge relief and belief in the future of a great country called Nigeria. But more than 2 decades since the advent of a consistent democracy in Nigeria, the stories have been sometimes sour, bitter, and very few times sweet. Now, leadership has been Nigeria's foremost challenge, and amid it all, we aim to count our blessings, if any. What has Nigeria gained from democracy? What has the people gained from democracy? Is democracy enough for the people? Is this the kind of democracy Nigerians have always wanted? These are some of the key things. Remember, Nigeria has 3 major tribes, 6 geopolitical zones, which we carved out, based on politics, more than 300 ethnic groups, and a population now being, put at over 200 million people, where everyone wants to be represented. From Nigeria's 6 geopolitical zones, 3 have produced presidents, namely the southern Nigeria, northwest of Nigeria, and the southwest of Nigeria. Of the 3 major tribes, 2 have produced presidents, and 1 has always raised an alarm on the necessity of his own presidency. Now, the question remains the importance of these divisions to the general progress of Nigeria, equitable distribution of leadership positions and places of power, with an almost blatant disregard for quality of personnel, may be an attendant risk of democracy, and this Nigeria can't say it hasn't faced. So the questions are enormous, and these are some of the things that we'll be having to talk about today. Joining me now, I understand that Ogbonna Nwuke is live with me on the show. Good to have you join me. He's a former lawmaker who represented Uche Omuma Federal Constituency. Good to have you on VSA today.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your time. And again, happy Democracy Day. As they say in Nigeria, it is absolutely in order to still say Happy Democracy Day. So 22 years down the line, how would you, being someone who's been in the thick of things, politically speaking, how would you rate Nigeria's democracy for over 2 decades now?
I think that we may not have come to who yet, but after 2 decades of trying to sustain democracy, we should be patting ourselves on the back. There's no system that's perfect, but for our great country, we, regardless of the hiccups, the fact that we have stick together, the fact that we continue to encourage in so many ways free speech, continue to articulate our viewpoints as Nigerians. I think that we have made some progress. Recall that from June 12, when the military stopped what looked like the freest and fairest election in this country, we've moved forward 16 years of democratic rule under the PDP, and now we're almost talking about 8 years of democratic rule under the APC. And whereas in the past it was difficult to hand over power from one government onto the other, under this dispensation, we have been able to transit from a PDP government to an APC government. All of these are signs.
Well, it looks like one of those days with technology. We'll take a moment and we'll get everything sorted out and we'll come back to the square. Stay with us. We're back, and thanks for your time and patience here on VSA on News Central Television. I still have two former lawmakers in Nigeria joining me on the square today, Ogbonna, Nwuke, and of course Uche, Onyeaguocha. Many thanks, gentlemen, for being a part of this great moment in the life of Nigeria. Happy Democracy Day is in order to you both, right?
I wish you the same.
Thank you very much. So let me quickly start off, or rather continue where we left off. I'll come back to you, Uche. I was actually having a conversation with Ogbonna before we lost the connection to him. You know, I think it looks like, well, there's a freeze now. I'll come back to Uche now. So Uche, tell us your own assessment, being someone who's been, you know, in the thick of things, politically speaking, in Nigeria. How would you rate Nigeria's democracy 22 years down the line? Can you hear me, Uche? Well, it would seem as if, you know, sometimes you have such kind of glitch, and I think it is such evenings. We do hope that we'll have a seamless connection to having this very important conversation. Good to see that both of you are back again. Quickly, before we lose this connection to Ogbonna, let me quickly allow you, round off. You were telling us your own assessment of Nigeria's democracy 22 years down.
Yes, I was saying that there are still something to cheer about. It's not been rosy. We've had the challenges. Everybody knows that this is the longest experience that we have in terms of democracy, practicing democracy in this country, and it only means that democracy has come to stay. But beyond that, perhaps the greatest challenge that we are facing as a nation now is the threat of insurrection, of insurgency. And being Nigerian, I'm very optimistic that we will overcome, as we have done in the past, and that we will look back at this dark time in our history and say we're never.
Let me quickly bring in Uche here. Thank you very much, Ogbonna. Honorable Uche, listening to Honorable Ogbonna, your colleague as well, then he said something very key here. He said, well, against all odds, there are some good things, and he's also been able to point out some of the, big problems Nigeria is dealing with at the moment, the issue of insecurity. But before we get there, tell us your own assessment of Nigeria's democracy 22 years down.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to appear on VSA. First, I will say that we don't have a democracy. What we have is civilian rule. And there is no way we can say that because we have a civilian rule, it automatically equates to democracy. Why am I insisting that we don't have a democracy? One, there is no independent judiciary. 2, there is no independent legislature. As long as there is absence of independent judiciary and independent legislature, you cannot claim to have a democracy, definitely. Now, going backwards to the June 12th election, you will recall that the June 12th election, for which we had a lot of protests across this country, that it is a far better election than the election of 1999. It is a far better election than the election of 2003, 2007, 2011, 2015, and 2019. So how can we have a situation where we all went into the streets protesting against the evil that was meted on Nigerian voters as a result of the June 12th election? And then the June 12th election, compared to the voting and the elections we have been having since then, is by far worse than what we had in 2012. So we have only managed to install civilians in government, but definitely we're not anywhere near democracy.
You know, the interesting thing here, Honorable Uche, is you've been able to put Nigerians back on the thinking track, to go back in time and look at the series of elections they've had since 1999 and put that in comparison with the 1993 June 12 election that was annulled. In all of this, it will mean that there are things that have not been put into practice following that very prominent election. What are those key things that are absent that has made what you have called civilian rule what it is?
The first thing is that our Electoral Commission is anything but independent. Every other president in this country, starting from Obasanjo himself, abused the INEC, rigged elections. The elections of 2003 were utterly rigged by Obasanjo. The elections that brought in Yaradua were also very much rigged, and himself accepted that much. The election of Jonathan was not anything but a free and fair election. And the election of Buhari was actually not the best. You could see that several efforts were made at every stage to manipulate the electoral process. What we have always had as results of our elections have actually not been the wishes of the Nigerian people. Underage voters always voted. Election results are always manipulated. Figures were always brought in from God knows where. And INEC always compromised themselves. Security agencies also compromise themselves. And the judiciary is even the worst off for it. When you go to tribunal, you don't get anything near to the justice for which you go to the tribunal to seek. So I find it difficult to accept that we have not put anything in place to enable us have a guaranteed free and fair election. And unless that is gotten, we cannot make progress. Now, one of the things I want us to point out is the Electoral Act. The Electoral Act puts the onus on the person who is claiming that the election was rigged to prove that it was rigged. The onus should be on INEC to show that they conducted a free and fair election. Because at the end of the day, it is always difficult for the petitioner to discharge this burden of proof, which is actually dumped on him. At all times, INEC must be made to show that there was free and fair election. And they have never been able to do that. And the burden has never been put on INEC. Unless until that is done, INEC will always dance the kind of game we're having, connive with electoral agencies. I pity the few individuals in INEC who are working hard to ensure that we have a free and fair election. It has actually been very difficult for the wishes of majority of Nigerians through votes to really be respected.
I'll come back to you, Uche, because some of the things you raised are germane, knowing full well that the man who's contesting an election honestly would need some materials not at his disposal, but within INEC's disposal, and that is why you're saying that that should be tweaked to ensure that it is on INEC to prove or to show that it has conducted a free, fair and credible election instead of the petitioner. We'll come back to you so that we can expatiate more on that. Good to see that you're back again, Honorable Ogbonna. And, the parliament is very key part of any strong democracy. While you were away, Uche said something that is very, very important about Nigeria's rule, saying there is no, independence in the judiciary and the legislature, making it very hard for him to term what Nigeria has at the moment a democracy. He calls it a civilian rule. Do you agree?
Well, democracy is about civilian rule. So I think that Uche is entitled to his opinion. But I think that as Nigerians, we need to be much more optimistic. We need to invest much more confidence in a democratic process. Now, the position of the law when it comes to proof has always been that the one who accuses has the onus to prove. So the issue is that perhaps after every election, we have had circumstances where people have had to go to the tribunal to test the law and test their faith. And somehow, I don't know who and why the INEC should be the organization here to bear the burden. We know that INEC has tremendously improved over time. There is no such thing as a perfect election. Coming from June 12, when we had what was considered the freest and maybe fairest election up to this date, there'll be some transition. And INEC gradually is beginning to move in the direction of the application of technology. All of these are efforts. The last election in Edo was perhaps considered what they were on account of how much the INEC tried to a free and fair election. Now, like I said, we're a young democracy. Of course, to refer to Uche, there may have been mistakes. Now, the parliament is doing what it can to tinker with the Electoral Act. It's not been as if the Electoral Act have been left cast in stone and left the way it is. There have been attempts to change. The fact that we are talking about first-line charge for the judiciary, for instance, which vests on that arm of government, what you consider financial autonomy, means that even Parliament is working to make sure that Nigerians who work in the judiciary are free to decide without inhibition, for instance, from the executive. So let us say to ourselves that there's no such thing as very sound democracy. Even the United States itself recently had a poll showing when the outgoing president claimed that the elections were rigged. So these things are matters of perception. But I've just been knocked out by NEPA.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
All right. So that's the point. Let us, as Nigerians, I'd like to plead with Uche. He may not be satisfied with what we have as a country, but let me plead with him that we need to have a system that works, and all of us working together can make that system work. You know, the buck passing, the blame game isn't the answer. But truth is that perhaps Uche has put on the table certain limitations that are connected to our democracy. Now, what the rest of us should do is try and find a solution.
We'll come back to both of you. Time for us to take a moment. When we come back, we'll be talking about more like solutions to some of the key identified problems to Nigeria's democracy, as highlighted by Honorable Uche Onyeaguocha and Honorable Ogbonna Nwuke. Stay with us. Well, it's the home stretch on VSA today, and of course we still have two former lawmakers, Honorable Uche Onyeaguocha and of course Honorable Ogbonna Nwuke, looking at Nigeria's democracy in the last 22 years, and both have been able to, remind Nigerians of, some of the key things to putting Nigeria back on a better political pedestal on the continent. Now, let me quickly, and earlier on I did say Senator Uche Sani will be joining us pretty much later before the end of the show. He should also weigh in on this conversation. But quickly here, Ogbonna, now that you're back, if you look at the basis of some of the good government we've seen on the continent, okay, I think Uche is still there. Thank you very much for your time. Now, I'm trying for us to look at the basis of any good government on the continent, which is very key here. Many times Nigerians have compared the democracy in Ghana to that of Nigeria, and they think that Ghana is far ahead of Nigeria in terms of democracy. Now, this brings us to some of the key things you raised in your opening, statement, talking about the missing link that should have been in Nigeria's democracy, making you not to refer it as an absolute democracy.
Well, thank you once again. But let me start by saying that the missing link is that at all times there is a military coup. The first arm of government that is attacked is always the legislature. Because the first thing the army will do will be to sack the legislature. And they have sacked the legislature for too long that the executive over the years have taken it for granted that the legislature is there for them to manipulate, to suit their whims and caprices. Now, the legislature must get very combative and retake all the powers that it is entitled to from the executive, because the executive is very abusive since 1999 and throughout the whole period of our democracy. You will note that at no time in any military coup does the executive lose any of its powers. Anytime a new executive government is elected, they take power continuing from the last military regime they inherit power from. But the legislature always will have to start afresh. In a lot of times, they do not have much experience to operate from. So I think that the missing link has to be strengthening the legislature, helping the legislature to regain their independence, and the legislature knowing its responsibility first by making sure that the electoral process is free. With due respect to my brother Nwuke, I think because from his own state, he is privileged. He's never been an opposition politician to understand what happens and how people who are rigged out of election feel. You can afford to say that in America there is no democracy. But the truth is that the potency of our democracy has been declining. Every election is worse than the previous one. At all times, everybody who is in control of the executive takes advantage of the INEC, which they manipulate. They appoint their stooges into the different sections of the Independent National Electoral Commission. And at the end of the day, what do? They manipulate all the processes. Even the state security services are the beck and call of the executive when they ought to be very independent and do their report in a manner that will satisfy good governance. So I will say that there is every need for the legislature to be combative and very jealous in protecting their powers and their independence. That is part of the way we can strengthen our democracy and be talking about having a democratic government. That is what is helping them in Ghana. That is what is helping them in South Africa. And there is no reason whatsoever why Ghana democracy should be ahead of us in terms of its free and fair approach. There is no reason to explain why that of South Africa should be freer than ours. We got independence far ahead of South Africa. We have had more democratic aspiration and struggles in Nigeria, much more than in Ghana. And we even have a much more civilian populace.
Sorry, excuse me, Honorable Uche. Let me quickly bring in Senator Shehu Sani. I did say earlier on that he was going to join us before the end of the show. Good to see you, Senator Sani. And, you know, before coming on, yes, and Honorable Uche has started off by letting Nigerians and Africans know some of the key missing links in Nigeria's democracy. To him, he thinks that at best it is civilian rule that it's operating in Nigeria and not a democracy. He's also said something very key, that's the independence of the legislature. Before I let you weigh in on the independence of the legislature, tell us your own assessment, being someone who's been in politics and also a rights activist before venturing into politics. How would you rate Nigeria 22 years down the line since 1999?
Hello?
Senator Sani, I can hear you, and I hope you heard my questions. I needed...
Yes, I heard you. If I can quickly go through it now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. That's fine. Go ahead.
Well, first and foremost, the missing link in our democratic process or experiment and the problems we face as a democracy of diverse kind. First of all, is the refusal of the political class to accept the fact that democracy is about the people, popular opinion, popular will, and popular resolve. Many of them still cannot free themselves from the hangover of military rule. And that is why you can see state governors behaving worse than the military administrators we have had before 1999. And secondly, we have a sort of a compliant or subservient National Assembly or Parliament at the state level. Most of those who are today occupying positions at the state level as honorable members, many of them were simply nominees and people that can be called boys of the state governor or some godfather sitting somewhere. And all they do is simply to endorse everything the state governor wants them to do. If you are a member of a state assembly and you even attempt to challenge the excessiveness or tyranny of your state governor, you are either suspended from the state assembly or you are marginalized or alienated. The third aspect of it has to do with the fact of our refusal to reform as we move along. The 1999 Constitution is facing a lot of challenges and realities of the 21st century. And it is important that we periodically sit down and holistically review this Constitution so that it can meet the realities of today. It's a fact that that Constitution came because the military want to exit, they are in a hurry to leave, and there is need for a document that will be the guiding principle and compass of the emerging democracy at that very time. Now, that's the three. The fourth aspect of it is that we are still thinking that somebody somewhere is going to come and solve our problem as a country. Our multi-ethnic and multi-religious identity supposed to be a source of strength, prosperity, and progress for us as a country. But people don't see themselves as Nigerians. They see themselves as Northerners, Southerners, with one tribe or another. If you don't have the spirit and the soul of the nation in you, whatever comes within that context will simply be of no interest to you. So the issue of love for your country is important in whatever system you are going to adopt, whether it is parliamentary, presidential, or whatever it is. The interest of your country is very important.
I think
the next aspect of it,
Senator Sani, there seemed to be a glitch. There seemed to be a glitch in the audio to you. I apologize. We'll have to reestablish that connection to you, Senator Shehu Sani. There's a kind of glitch on the audio connection. Let me quickly come to Honorable Uche. You know, listening to Shehu Sani, it would seem as if he was here when we started the show. Almost everything you highlighted, even though he was at the Senate and you were at the House of Representatives, he said it, but now he's been able to talk more about some of the key actors who try as much as possible not to make good Nigeria's democracy, but somehow put it in a very bad light by being autocratic. He talks about the executive arm, some key individuals like governors, also entries in the state legislature. Tell us how, now we're talking about problem solving as we wind down. How can these, be taken off Nigeria's democratic history and be rewritten for good?
First, we need a philosopher king in Abuja. Secondly, anybody who gets opportunity of being president must be a statesman in the first instance. Thirdly, if you get elected president, you must understand that it is a real privilege and you have a responsibility to leave a legacy behind. If you do not buy into any of these three, it will just be any other person who is passing through power who wants to take advantage and steal some money for yourself. And it's only when you leave power that you realize that with all the money you have stolen, that you're just another nobody. And then you'll be complaining like the rest of the people. But most of the problem we have in the states result from impositions from Abuja at the center. Everybody who is the president wants to install people in the different states. Their wives want to install stooges in the different states. The powerful people in Abuja want to take advantage of their powers to install people in the legislature and the executive. And when they install these people, the governors will themselves turn around and impose people in the State House of Assemblies and impose local government chairmen So you have a lot of stooges all over the place because the local government chairmen are all stooges of the governors. The legislators at the state assembly level are stooges of the state government. At the federal level, only very few people come to Abuja as independently elected legislators who can speak their mind. I had opportunity of a scenario where we agreed that we were going to oppose the attempt by the Obasanjo regime to impose a state of emergency in Plateau State. Across the broad decision. When we were about to march into the National Assembly, into the chambers of the House of Reps, everybody started calling me aside. Uche, there is a change in plan. I said, by who? They said their governors called them, that their governors said they shouldn't continue with the original plan. So that the original plan has been abandoned, that they have all decided to support the Obasanjo plan to impose an emergency in Plateau. I said, well, I'm not going to be part of that decision. They said, well, you're your own. So we got into the assembly and into the chambers. And all these people whom you have had meetings yesterday and reached a decision that what Obasanjo was about to do in Plateau State was wrong, we are all tongue-tied. And at the end of the day, they had been called by their different governors to abandon their plan, to oppose the decision, even when we knew it was wrong. There was no reason for that imposition of state of emergency in Plateau State. But because these legislators were all remote controlled by their governors from the different states, that was the end of the game. So unless I insist that these legislators emerge through a free and fair electoral process, they will remain stooges of their different governors. And as long as they remain stooges of their different governors, you are wasting your time in Abuja. You might think that the speaker has any independence. He doesn't have. Somebody is manipulating the speaker from Lagos. Somebody is manipulating the Senate president from Abuja. Somebody is manipulating the speakers in the different state houses of assembly from the governor's office. So we do not have anything close to democracy. They're all stooges. And that is why many governors today are resisting that monies accruable to the judiciary should come from first-line charge. They want to be responsible for the release of monies to the judges. That way, they manipulate the judges. They want to continue to control how monies are released to the state houses of assembly so that they can continue to manipulate the state houses of assembly. And to show you how bad this situation is, even the state houses of assembly, when there was a constitutional amendment process, where they were required to vote for independence of the legislature for the purpose of having their monies accruing from first line charge, where the governors will not have any control over it. They couldn't even vote for themselves to be free. So imagine a situation, a slave has been given an opportunity to vote for his freedom, and he still voted against his freedom. So that kind of scenario, what will you call it? Democracy? When a slave refuses to vote for his freedom, what we have is a civilian government. And in all the cases, the governors manipulate everything that comes out of the state houses of assembly. In our own case, Obasanjo even manipulated the Electoral Act. We had a scenario where Obasanjo in 2007 election went and used his powers to smuggle into the Electoral Act that if the president the presidential candidate of a particular party dies within the period of the election will be suspended, and to accommodate that party to bring another candidate. And he smuggled that in. That was not what we passed. He smuggled that in, hoping and believing that perhaps Yar'Adua will die. But unfortunately for him, Yar'Adua didn't die. In fact, in order to shame him, the presidential candidate of the AD, died. And people were expecting to say, okay, now that the presidential candidate of AD died, are you going to cancel the election? Are you going to stop it?
These are key, and grave revelations you've just been given, and it definitely will worry any Nigerian or African, especially knowing full well that it borders on the independence of the legislature and the kind of politics that goes on there. So just to hold down the legislature. Let me quickly bring Shehu Sani here, because we're trying to round off. This conversation certainly can't end today here on the square. We're hoping that we can also have this conversation in the days to come. Senator Sani, good to have you back again. Apologies for that glitch in the connection to you. We've been, listening to Honorable Uche, and he's said so much about how some people are handpicked and the kind of influence some key people from the executive arm have over people who should make laws and also strengthen in countries' democracy like Nigeria. Have you also witnessed some of those things he's highlighted? Well, I thought for a bit Senator Sani was back, but
Hello.
well, I'm hoping we can actually get to bring Senator Sani back, and even Honorable Uche back again, but. It looks like we can't connect to Senator Sani. But before we round off quickly here, talking about leadership recruitment process, Honorable Uche, it's very key here. That means one thing: those who bring themselves up for elective positions must be checkmated to see that they are also independent from the word go. Otherwise, you get someone who's been handpicked that will be manipulated ultimately when he or she gets elected.
Yes. And that is the more reason why the general public must be on the alert. Because at the end of the day, it is their interest that is at stake. Security agencies, I want to use this opportunity to say they have a key role to play. But they must understand that at the end of the day, that everybody will be buying from the same market. After you have elected a bad executive, and the bad executive introduces bad economic policies, you will still be a victim. So we need to have every sector of the government, all those on whom it lies to ensure that this democracy is guaranteed, play their role. The media is doing a good job, and we should have a much more robust media to expose what is going on. But the military agencies, the security agencies that are always used to manipulate the electoral process must see that they are always victims at the end of the day. Because by the time a new regime comes in, they become the first victim. They all wipe them out and put their own stooges and put their own boys. And then at the end of the day, they move on as if nothing happens. And then they will find out that they are out there in the market suffering the same thing that everybody is suffering. Today, you can see the exchange rate of the naira to the dollar. Nobody is going to say because a former military personnel or security personnel that you're going to get your own dollar at a cheaper rate. Nobody is going to say that you're going to go to a different hospital because you're a different military personnel. The truth is that all of us will suffer it equally. Do not wait until you become a victim. Take advantage of the position you have. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for your children's future. Time is running out for most of us who are now in our late 50s, going to our 60s. Do it for your children. If you miss this opportunity to do it for your children, you may never get another opportunity. Nobody has no
Well, I think, I think finally we got that glitch there on Uche. But again, apologies, and I must say thank you for your time, everyone there. Well, democracy for Nigeria has been good, no doubt, listening to all of you, and bad again. So if, this continues, I think Nigeria and Nigerians must work towards getting it better. And of course, at this point in time, I'd like to say many thanks to Senator Shehu, Sani, Honorable Uche, Onyeaguocha, and Ogbonna, Nwuke. Thank you for being such nice company. We do hope that in the days to come, we should have you back here on the square to speak more about governance and development for Nigerians and the African continent. It's a wrap on today's show. Tomorrow, we have a continuation of this conversation on the square tomorrow. I hope to see you then. Bye-bye.